Both parties are delusional in thinking that this is a long-run problem. The Ryan plan gets to balanced budget in 2030, the fiscal hereafter. We have a here and now problem. This debt that we're issuing every day, $6 billion a day, is not being bought by real investors. It's being bought by the Fed and other central banks around the world, and they're going out of business in June. The Fed is stopping the bond buying. QE2 is over. The Chinese no longer need to buy, and the Japanese have their own problem. So once we have to sell the debt to real investors, interest rates are going to start rising, and the crisis will come immediately in the next 2 or 3 years. Both parties are delusional in thinking that this is a long-run problem. We have a here and now problem, and the crisis will come immediately in the next 2 or 3 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike George.
Welcome. As most of you know, my name is Mike George. I'm the founder of Strong America Now. And the purpose of this meeting was originally intended to brief presidential candidates on the reality of how we could eliminate our deficit by 2017. When we talked to people and said, well, we're going to have an all-day session the day before Father's Day, they said, well, you'll be lucky to get 100 people show up. I think they misunderstand the resolve of Iowans, of Illinoisans, and people from Nebraska who got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be here today. We have over 1,000 people in attendance. Now, this campaign began February the 15th at the state capitol. We had 10 people. I'm pleased to tell you today that we currently have 15,000 Iowans alone who have pledged to only support those candidates who will end the deficit by 2017. Now, these 10 that we began with, these stout-hearted 10, I call them, will be introduced to you at the end of this meeting. But it shows you what courage, resolve, persistence can do when you can grow from 10 to 15,000 in just 4 short months. I think there's an old adage, there's nothing in the world so powerful as an idea whose time has come, and the time for eliminating the deficit has come. Now, David Stockman has had a distinguished career as an economist, the manager of OMB for President Reagan, and he claims that both parties are delusional. Now, those are harsh words, and I want to modify them just a bit. Both parties have got plans for eliminating the deficit in 30 years. Stockman says that is the financial hereafter as far as the United States is concerned. We're all going to be bankrupt anyway, so it really is not a solution. However, the 2 plans I'm going to discuss, the Deficit Commission plan, it was bipartisan, and Paul Ryan's congressional plan, both have good ideas. They both have bad ideas. But the point is that if you add to either of these plans $500 billion of waste reduction, you will balance the budget in 2017. You will start generating a surplus of $200 billion in 2018 and begin paying down the national debt as this man told us to do. Now, Stockman said we have a problem in the next 3 years. We've really got to cut the deficit at least in half in 3 years. Waste reduction can accomplish most of that while the other longer-term things are going on. But when you talk about a 3-year need and a 30-year solution, what does that, we have a lot of naval people here today, that brings to mind the story of the McCain, doesn't it? Let's say that McCain is due to hit an iceberg in 3 minutes, and captain on the bridge says, well, okay, 3 minutes, I'll change course in 20 minutes. there would be a mutiny on the cane, wouldn't there? Well, I'm to tell you that everything Stockman says is right, but there is a middle ground. There's a way to use the good ideas that Congress has had and that both parties have had, couple it with waste reduction, and solve this problem as a bipartisan solution, which frankly is the only solution that is going to stick, isn't it? We here together, in this audience, I'm so pleased to say there are Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, pro-life, pro-choice, Tea Party, Gold Standard, you name it. We're all here together as Americans, not with our other agendas. Now, there may be many people, and many people here today, that wonder if it's really possible to cut waste by $500 billion per year. To answer that, we have a two-pronged attack. After I speak, Gordon England, the former Deputy Secretary of Defense, is going to talk about his experience in waste reduction across the Department of Defense, the largest single organization in the U.S. government. We're then going to have 4 experts. They're called Master Black Belts that really understand waste reduction, typically known as Lean Six Sigma, a process I helped create. They're going to give you 4 examples of dramatic reductions in waste. Before me here, I have Nurse Karen Rago. She's going to talk to you about an issue that affects everyone who's worried about Medicare. At Stanford University Hospital, Karen led a team that found out that cardiac bypass surgery had 40% waste spending in it that could be eliminated. And you might say, oh, wait a minute, that might hurt my chances of survival if they cut money out of cardiac bypass surgery. But here's the answer. While they cut 40% of the cost of cardiac bypass surgery out, they also reduced the death rate by 48%. Is that the kind of result you want? And she's going to have many other examples across the medical industry to show you that there's some tremendous opportunities. We're also going to introduce General Jim Peake. Jim was the Secretary of Veteran Affairs. Prior to that, he was Surgeon General of the U.S. Army and was a Lieutenant General. His knowledge into medical practice goes deep because he is a doctor. He will be joined by Mike Kirby, who was my boss at the Army when I was a consultant there. Mike was Deputy Undersecretary of the Army for Business Transformation, and he knows what it takes to successfully drive waste reduction across the U.S. government. That is a very key issue. We're also going to be joined by Hugh Hewitt. Hugh is a remarkable Renaissance man. He's not, you probably know him as a talk radio host, but as a matter of fact, he's also a professor of constitutional law, and so his knowledge of this country and its history goes very deep. So, you're probably wondering who I am and what is this guy trying to sell Iowans? Now, Iowa has the wonderful distinction of having politicians come in here every few years and try to sell you their plan, right? I'm not running for office. I'm retired. I have no political ambitions. What I did is I ran a consulting business, sold it in 2007, and then while I was enjoying my retirement, this tremendous financial collapse occurred. Now, it was easy for me to sit back and relax. I was sitting on cash. I actually had enough money. I didn't have to work. I'm not a Texas billionaire, but I'm comfortable. I have as much money as I need to make. But I decided, and I talked to my friends, and we all agreed that if we could apply the waste reduction methods that have been applied in the Army and naval aviation across the whole government, we could solve this fiscal crisis. And it would be wrong of us to have this knowledge, which the U.S. government effectively gave us, this experience, and not give it back to the U.S. government to apply across the whole structure to solve this terrible, pressing problem. Now, just how serious is this problem? When Timothy Geithner, our Treasury Secretary, made his presentation on the budget this year to Congress, he said that the interest on the debt was going to grow from $300 billion to $840 billion per year within 10 years. That's real money. It's taxpayer money that has to pay for that. Some people will tell you, oh, well, so what? The debt's $14 trillion. Well, our GDP is $14 trillion, so it really doesn't matter. Well, to those people, I want you to say, oh, well, we have to pay the interest on the debt, though. That's the problem, isn't it? And if you think about $840 billion per year, it's probably understated, correct? We only collect $2.5 trillion in taxes per year. If we're going to spend about $1 trillion on interest payments, that means we're going to have to cut out most of defense, most of Medicare, most of Social Security, just to make ends meet, correct? We've got to somehow come up with that money because we're not going to be able to borrow it forever. Now, those are not my numbers. Those are the administration's numbers. What do we mean by running a deficit in the government? Well, they give you a lot of mumbo-jumbo words, but many of you are business people or have worked in a business here in Iowa. Running a deficit in the government is just like running a business at a loss. Every year, you pay out more money than you take in from your customers. And you have to finance the difference with debt. You got to go borrow the difference with debt. So, how does a business solve that problem? Well, here's how Congress is proposing to solve it, at least some members of Congress. They suggest we raise taxes and lower the services the government provides. Cut out Medicare, cut out Social Security, or reduce it dramatically, cut defense. If those kinds of people applied that thinking to business, how would they save a business that was losing money? Here's how they would do it. They say, gee, we're losing money, so we'll raise prices and cut out the services to the customer, and that is what? That is the path to bankruptcy, isn't it? So that kind of thinking has to be eliminated from the minds of our congressmen and our next president. I'm here in Iowa to help influence the next presidents to understand this process. And we're not doing this for ourselves. We're not wanting tax breaks for ourselves. We're wanting this nation to return to fiscal sanity for the sake of our children and our grandchildren.
In conclusion, treating the deficit as a 30-year problem is delusional. The interest on the debt alone will cripple Medicare, Social Security, and defense. We can eliminate the deficit by 2017 and start paying down the debt in 2018. We can do this by reducing government waste by $500 billion per year, in addition to the Deficit Commission plan.